Welcome to Page to Screen, the podcast where Nikki and Christina discuss books that were turned into movies and films that were adapted from books. As always, we do remind you that spoilers lay ahead. Now, we invite you to decide with us the age-old question, which is better, the book or the movie?
The battle continues. Welcome back to Page to Screen's Battle of the Modern Day Vampire. Joining, as always, is my favorite vamp, Christina.
Hello, Nikki. How are you?
I'm so ready to get into this.
I know.
Am I ready to sink my teeth into it? Oh, God, put me out to pasture. If you are just joining us, go back and listen to the last episode. This October, we are doing the Battles of the Modern Day Vampire. 2 weeks ago, our last episode, we did Twilight. Super sparkly vampire Twilight. And today, we're doing one of Christina's favorites.
It is one of my favorites. I'm so excited to talk about it. We're doing Interview with the Vampire, which was originally a novel written by Anne Rice, published in 1976. It is a gothic horror vampire novel, and the center vampires are Louis and Lestat, and then also accompanying them from time to time are Claudia and Armand. I love Interview with the Vampire so much.
I have seen the movie like 100 times, but this was really my first time reading the book. Mm-hmm. And it's great. It's a great book.
It's so good, right?
I mean, there are some things about the book where I was just like, ooh.
Yeah, we'll get there.
But overall, like, I really enjoyed it. Like, I had a lot of fun with this book.
Yeah, I love the book, but I love the movie so much that I think that my love for the movie has overshined my love for the book over the years. But revisiting it for this podcast, I'm like, this is actually really good. Yeah. And it's kind of like if you take some of that melodrama that we've talked about with Twilight and even back with Valley of the Dolls, I think that it doesn't work in those, but it so works here. It's like the way I think about it is that if Stephen King is Americana, he writes in just type. And if it's Anne Rice writing it, it's worldly and she writes in cursive.
Yeah. I feel that. I get that. Like I want to try and compare it as much as I can to Twilight, but you really can't. Because there's two completely different subgenres. Like, they're completely different. Like, their overall genre is like vampire. Mm-hmm. But to compare these two, it's like apples and oranges. Because especially when you think of the prose with Anne Rice, like, it is like poetry.
It really is.
And some of the descriptions, like, you feel like you're there a lot more than I felt like I was in the Pacific Northwest, where the vampires come from.
Well, and when we were talking about Twilight, one of the knocks that I gave Twilight was that I had been told over the years that people were like, well, fuck Bella and Edward. Just look at the backstories that these other vampires have. That's the stuff that I really like. Well, I didn't really get it from Twilight. Maybe it's in the other movies, but I certainly didn't get it from that book. This book, however, it does this great thing of you do get really cool backstories. The whole thing is a backstory of a modern day vampire. And then it does kind of allude to certain things when, especially like when Armand is talking, you're like, oh, what does he mean there? And you might not get the whole backstory, but it's enough to make it just very cool and creepy, and you get the weight of these vampires and their lives.
Yeah, and that's something where I'm glad that there is an entire, like a 7 or 8 book series for the Vampire Chronicles. These 7 or 8 books really expand upon the world that she created with this one. And I think you need that because at times, I will say with this book, at times some things were a little long-winded.
Yeah.
So you're reading some stuff and you're like, okay, wow, great. And then it was like, okay, now she's going a little Stephen King-y on me and overly explaining some stuff.
Right.
And I think that you need those other books to really, she needed more depth. You could tell she wanted more depth on a lot of things in this book. So I'm glad that there's all those other books to try and really, like, give you even more.
But, at the same time, like, how many pages was Twilight?
I don't even remember. What, 200? I don't know.
Twilight felt like it was 1,000 pages.
Yeah.
It felt so long. And this is, I think, like a little bit over 300. I think mine's like 305.
Yeah, I think it's somewhere between like 300 and like, I don't know, 320.
Yeah, and you think about everything that happened. A lot happens. Decades go by, and it feels like pretty concise though. It's like she takes the 300 pages and there's a lot in there when you really think about it. And then when I think about Twilight, I'm like, this is kind of boring.
Yeah.
Like at no point did I find out how Louis cooks. That did not happen.
Well, what's interesting about, I would have loved to have read a whole chapter about Louis cooking.
And this is how you saute rat.
Rats. What I really like about this book is the way it's presented to the reader. It's, what's it, 4 separate sections. So you have like the beginning, the 2 middle, and then the end. But the first whole section is literally just him talking back and forth with the boy. And he's just the vampire and the boy. And all of a sudden the boy kind of drops off, and I didn't even notice.
Right.
I was so into what Louis was saying, especially when they got to Paris, that I didn't even realize that the boy was gone from the entire equation until we got to the last section and he showed up again.
Well, I remember the first time reading it, and yeah, I completely forgot about the interviewer, and then at some point it like cuts back, and I remember the paragraph had the quotation. I'm like, but nobody's talking. What do you mean? And I was like, oh wait, yeah, he is talking. Yeah. This is not the reason why that's there is because this is him speaking this to somebody, and I think that's so cool. It's like you completely forget what even started before. And then when you think about it, it's like, oh, well, wait a minute. What's going to happen? What's he going to do to this kid then? Yeah.
Like I'm trying to find like a really good place to start with this book. I mean, much like The Sound of Music says, start at the very beginning. It's interesting how Louis is I would say he is completely different from his movie version.
He really is, and I have some thoughts about that when we get into the movie version.
Yeah, I enjoyed this weird. It's weird because it kind of reminded me of the Twilight situation where Bella wants to be a vampire, and she wants to protect her mom and dad. Louis becomes a vampire, sort of against his will, sort of not. I think he definitely chose it because what else was he was grieving the death of his brother, but he is still like this really great older brother to his sister.
Yeah.
He takes care of his mom. Like he pays for them to do all this stuff because he's just a rich like plantation owner.
Yeah.
In the South. And in other vampire fiction and film, television, when they become vampires, they become these monsters. They're monstrous. Right. And then you have Louis, who is just a Southern gentleman who's a vampire.
Yeah, and I like forgot how much I liked the beginning part too. And I feel like we're gonna kind of dip in and out of the book and movie a little bit, but in the movie, it's just his wife and his daughter die, and then that's how he ends up in the depression. And then in the book, it's a lot more complicated, and I think it's more interesting. And it's got this Southern Gothic version of what you get in like Turn of the Screw or something, where it's not just an easy way to go. He's sad his wife died. It's this complicated thing he's got with his brother, and his brother is extremely religious, and religion has like a much bigger overtone in the book, I think, than it does in the movie. And the brother is like, the brother actually thinks he's like a saint. So he is like crazy overly religious, and Louis is both supportive but also doesn't believe him. And then because his brother dies, then he gets all of this grief and guilt associated with it. And I don't know, I just find that to be way more interesting and like almost like an Edgar Allan Poe kind of a thing, where it's just a lot more complicated for his grief and his questions about religion and humanity.
Yeah, it goes a lot deeper in the book. And it's also interesting because his brother dies by like falling down the stairs. And it's what I thought was really interesting is that once Louis is a vampire, no one else in the house for a long time even questions some of the deaths that are happening around them. But his brother falls down the stairs and everyone was like, you killed him.
Right.
And I thought that was so interesting that he's accused of doing something that he definitely didn't do.
Right.
But not accused of doing any of the stuff that he's definitely doing.
Right.
I was like, what are you guys talking about? He definitely did that. Yeah, and then also with the family dynamic, there's that he's in, like, as a vampire, he falls in love with, like, his next door neighbor.
Right. You know, Sally, she's the one that always brings the potato salad.
As one does. You've always fallen in love with your next door neighbor when you turn into a vampire. The book definitely gives Louis this entire world that we don't get, you know, we'll talk about it when we get into the movie. And I thought that was really interesting too. It's like once he tries to like free his slaves and he convinces them all that like basically he's the devil or whatever, he's able to run to his next door neighbor's house and like sleep in her closet because he had previously been there and convinced her that he was like an angel. I know it sounds ridiculous, you guys, but read the book. It makes a lot more sense.
I never thought it sounded silly until you said it.
Like when you talk about it out loud, like when you break it down like that out of context, it kind of sounds ridiculous, but it works. And it's, I don't know. I really enjoyed that dynamic too. Because we know that Louis has this internal struggle with himself. Like he thinks of himself as this monster, but he's like a monster with a heart of gold. Because he doesn't want Lestat to kill anybody. Yeah. You know, he gorges on rats.
There is the awkward moment, though, when you realize he is a slave owner.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, man, yeah, that's right. The main character of this story is a slave owner. That's right.
Yeah. It's not a good look.
It's a bit of a bummer.
Yeah. But he does get his own comeuppance.
He does.
When you think about it, once Claudia comes into the picture. Because the slave owner becomes the slave. Like, that's the best way to describe that whole, well, there's other ways to describe that whole dynamic, but that's the one I want to go with first.
Real quick, let me actually ask you. I know that we addressed this at the end of the last episode, but have you read the other Vampire Chronicle books?
I did some of the Vampire Lestat.
Okay.
And at the end of the last episode, I was like, I read that one. And then I remembered after we recorded, I never finished that one. Yeah. But I picked that one up because I had seen Queen of the Damned.
Yeah.
And I was like, this movie does not make sense.
Well, isn't Queen of the Damned like part Vampire Lestat and part Queen of the Damned?
Yeah.
It's like they mixed. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why it didn't make any sense. And that's why I was like, I have to read this so I can make sense of why he's a leather wearing rock star right now, because I'm not understanding any of this.
Yeah, and I'm interested in, because I also picked up the Vampire Lestat and I never finished reading it. I don't even think I got that far in. I mean, I think I'm probably at 100 or less pages. But I'm actually kind of more interested in grabbing it again because Lestat he's pretty similar to the movie, but he's a little bit different. And he also has a dad. And so when he gets Louis, it's a little bit less of like a meet cute. And then they kind of have a relationship. Instead, he like hunts him because he wants his wealth and his status.
That, when we find out he has a human father, I kid you not, I wanted to throw the book. I wanted to throw the book because I was like, what do you mean? This makes no sense. But also at the same time, I had to think back like, okay, the time period at which Louis is alive right now and all of this, it makes perfect sense for Lestat to have a blind father. Like, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and the father being blind is interesting because then he won't actually see his son never aging, and he will have a little bit less of a reason to suspect him.
Yeah. And I think that you really need that father dynamic in there to kind of understand a little bit more about Lestat as an individual, because his dad, kind of a buzzkill, like kind of a bummer. Like he got rid of all of his books and all of this stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, so now I understand why Lestat likes to kind of torture people a little bit. Because I imagine the abuse that he went through, and that might be why Lestat himself, I mean, I'm going to have to reread Vampire Lestat and figure out more of his backstory, because we don't really get into it in this, but it would make perfect sense for him to reach out and find love, because he was in love with his maker.
We should totally do the Vampire Lestat and Queen of the Damned,
For
maybe April Fool's Day next year.
Oh my God, yes. It's going down. We're doing it. We're bringing back vampires once a month, you guys.
This book has so many different themes throughout it. And talking about the dad, there is definitely a theme of what it means to be a parent and the struggles that children and parents have, because you've got the father figure there. You've got Lestat, who is sometimes like, the kids that are abused at home, and then they act very childish and they act out and they hurt other people, where the cycle of trauma just keeps going and going, because then he passes that off to Louis. But then at the same time, when Louis is getting turned into a vampire, he compares drinking blood to drinking mother's milk. So it's like you've got this thing where Lestat then becomes kind of like the mother to Louis, but then once Claudia comes in, Louis is kind of like the mom.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's all very interesting.
Yeah, the family dynamic here, it's like watching a relationship come together and then fall apart.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, I want to say it's almost like divorce a lot of the time.
Is this just like 500 Days of Summer?
Yes.
It's 500 Years with Louis.
I want to see them do a dance in a park. Quick, call Hall & Oates. Come on, you guys.
Louis just starts wearing sundresses. He'd look great. I'd love to see it.
Listen, I think he would look fabulous. Don't even kid. I do think it's interesting, that dynamic between Lestat and Louis, because it's almost as if, and this is weird, it's almost as if Lestat was constantly trying to make Louis happy.
Yeah.
In a weird roundabout way. Kind of like a mentally abusive kind of way, where he was like, I'm just trying to make you happy.
That's exactly. I wrote down, this is like a mentally abusive, toxic relationship.
Yeah. It really is, but they're also kind of a mirror. They're kind of a mirror image of each other too. So it's almost like this weird twin situation between the two of them. Lestat was basically kind of forced to become a vampire. He didn't have a choice. And we know that because he constantly, when he turns Louis, he's like, I'm going to give you the choice I never had. So Lestat was forced to be a vampire, and he didn't get to live a real life, which he resents, but he finds a way to accept it, and, he doesn't mind the killing. Whereas Louis was given a choice, but he didn't have to be turned. Like, Lestat even says, like, you'll be, like, this is it. This is your chance. Yes or no. And yet he spends a majority of the first half of the book whining about being a vampire. And it was like, you could have chosen differently.
It's very like Harry Potter book 5.
Oh my God. And exactly what you're talking. Yes. 100%.
And Louis has a little bit more knowledge about what he's getting himself into in the book rather than the movie, because he actually sees a kill. And so he knows that this is part of the whole thing. So it's not like the Batman won't kill thing. It's he gets what's going to happen.
Yeah. He's not naive to it in the book. He has a basic knowledge and a basic understanding, and he knows this is Lestat's life, and that if he says yes, this is his life. Mm-hmm. And he still says yes, and then complains about it. That's like being lactose intolerant and being like, I'm gonna eat the cheese pizza, and then being mad that you ate cheese. You did it to yourself. Like, I don't know how to explain this any other way. You know what's gonna happen. Like, I thought that was really interesting because, when we get to the movie, it's not as black and white as I guess it is in the book, and I really appreciate having the book to get a little bit deeper. Mm-hmm. And then once I guess now that we've talked about, we brought her up, I guess we have to bring up Claudia
the
now.
big lady. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. I was also shocked at this point when I found out. Yeah, she is 5 years old in the book.
Yeah. I actually forgot too that she was that little. Because in the movie she is supposed to be 10 and she's played by an 11-year-old.
Yeah.
And in the book she's only 5 years old, and there's a huge difference between 5 and 10.
Yeah.
Like at 10, 10 is like part of the best age. Like the best age is that like end of 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, because they start to turn into the little adults.
Yeah.
And they're little adults and they've got little brains and they're like thinking about things. There's more wonder and there's more personality. And at 5, they're still such a little kid.
Yeah, you still can't do anything on your own. I think at 10, I mean, at least, at 10 were you able to make your own mac and cheese or something, Christina?
Yeah.
See, at 5, I don't think an adult would let you use the stove.
I like that that's the benchmark.
Can you make your own mac and cheese? Good. You can be a vampire. It's just alarming that young of an age because of what happens later in the books. Because she starts off as this, they dress her like a doll. They dress her like a small child consistently. Like 50 odd years go by. But what they don't seem to understand is, they're looking at someone who is a child, but the brain keeps functioning and getting older and becoming adult. And I think everyone knows where we're going with this.
Yeah.
It's easier to comprehend having an 11-year-old play a 10-year-old going through this. A 5-year-old who enters into, later on in the book, they do say marriage.
Yeah.
With her caregiver.
Yeah, and the interesting backstory to it is that Anne Rice lost her daughter at 5 to leukemia. So it's interesting to have that in mind when you read about Claudia and the tragedy of Claudia, because I can't imagine what it's like to be a parent to lose a child, but the thing is that she thought, like, how could I keep her for forever?
Yeah.
But is that a good thing? Just because we can, should we? Like, is it actually a good thing to have a small child and then develop like an adult inside that little kid's body? It's a really disturbing and frankly fucked up idea to contemplate. And it's so dark and so tragic.
You know what it kind of reminded me of? Do you know about Gypsy Rose Blanchard? That's what it kind of reminded me of.
Right.
Because her mom lied about her age.
Yeah.
Made her a lot younger than she was. So in front of all these people out and about, you know, she was a small child who had a disease that she was dying from. But online, she was just a normal, you know, 16, 17, 18-year-old.
Right.
And to have those two, I can't imagine what it must be like to have those two fighting in your brain. Mm-hmm. And that must be what, you know, Claudia had to face with.
Right.
She looks like a young child, is a young child, but has the brain of like a 40-year-old woman.
Right.
I was shocked by the age just because it felt very, I don't want to say pedophile.
Oh, no, you can. There's a lot of weird themes with Interview the Vampire. Everyone thinks of, you know, homoeroticism, but there's a really uncomfortable pedophilic. Is that the right term for it?
Yeah, because I guess if we're going to talk about Claudia's age, we have to talk about Armand.
Yeah.
Because that was also where I was like, I'm sorry, he has red hair and he's how old?
I know.
I was like, red hair must be a Weasley. But
Okay, and by the way, so when I was doing some research for this episode, and this is one of those episodes that's kind of fun for me because I really didn't do much research because I just remember so many of the like trivias and stuff, but I was looking through things and I found this hysterical, it was on, it was like a blog, and it was this guy and he's complaining about the movie. And then he's like, and Armand doesn't look anything like the book, but I am totally fine with it. And I thought that was so funny. I was like, all right, calm down, buddy.
I'm totally fine with it too, because the description of him in the book, he's 17.
Yeah.
And Louis is forever 24. Mm-hmm. So it's not that big of a difference. It's not that bad compared to a 5-year-old and a 24-year-old.
But it's still interesting that 17 is such a choice. 17 is such a choice because 17 is widely considered to be like your last year of being a child.
Yeah.
And 18 is still just so young. I mean, think about how you were when you were 18. 18, you are not an adult yet. It takes a little bit longer to get some, you know, world experience, but it's the body of a 17-year-old, but the mind of someone much older.
Yeah, he's like, what, 400?
Yeah, old as shit.
But see, and this is, it's weird because, you know, when people, there was the really big case about the teacher who slept with the student. Yeah. And she had his baby. And her argument was that he seemed like wise beyond his years. Yeah. That's the kind of feeling I get when it's like Armand and Louis talking to each other in Paris. And I'm like, oh, no. Yeah. Don't do this. Please don't do this. And I just want everyone to understand, like, their love is more of a connected love. It is not a sexual love. At no point in this book is anyone physically sleeping with each other. I mean, Claudia sleeps in the same coffin as Louis, fully clothed, but they're never...
Sorry, Lestat does trick Louis when he first changes him because I don't buy it. It's a little weird. He's like, oh, sorry, I forgot we would need a second coffin. Oh, yeah. Guess you're going to have to sleep with me tonight.
That relationship, I think that's where the abuse starts in that relationship.
Yeah, there's a lot of abuse in that relationship.
I definitely think that Lestat is in love with Louis and would do anything to make him happy. And when Louis tries to leave and is like, I can't do this anymore, he wants to break up. That's when he's like, that's when Lestat's like, You can't leave me. I have a baby.
Yeah, it really is. Let's have a baby to save the relationship.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that is so problematic. And that
It
is
is.
such an issue in any red flags everywhere.
Everywhere.
Are vampires like colorblind? Red, red, red everywhere. Like
But
jeepers.
I just think it's so cool how the vampire, you would probably call it more of like a companionship, partnership, but it's still a relationship and it feels so intimate between all of them.
Yeah.
And when like Claudia freaks out because she thinks that Louis is going to leave her for Armand, it sounds like someone who's going crazy thinking that their husband's cheating on them.
Yeah.
And
Well, he
she's trying.
is.
He is.
He leaves and doesn't tell her anything.
It's so interesting though to have that without like explicit sexuality between them, but it's still kind of there, and then to have the age differences with two people that are still dressed like children.
Yeah. I will say that I think that it's more of a relationship of like the heart and the feelings, and I think that is even worse when you think about like not in that way. I mean, like sexual cheating is one thing, but to be so drawn to an individual that you cannot be without them is on a completely different level.
Yeah.
And that I think is that's where Claudia goes crazy. That's when, you know, Lestat loses it because Louis is emotionally attached to somebody else. And I think that is something that Claudia and Lestat will never be able to comprehend. Because
Also, Louis is just like a fucking asshole.
yeah.
Just breaking hearts left and right.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He's a lady killer, like literally and figuratively. And Louis is also kind of... Louis bothered me a lot at the beginning of the book until they get rid of Lestat. In the same, like, and it's so much fun when they get rid of Lestat. It's so fun. But until they get rid of him, Louis is kind of, he's kind of pompous a little about money.
Right.
And one line that bothered me the most, and it's something that stuck with me so much that I didn't even write it down or even note it when I first saw it. And then I went to bed and I was like, wait a minute. He was like, Lestat could convince me to turn a child but not part with my money. What? Like, what is wrong with you? Why? Like, how did money come first before the idea that maybe turning a 5-year-old into a vampire is a bad idea?
Yeah.
And it was literally something that kept me up. I was like, I can't sleep now.
I was so curious what the line was going to be, and I thought I knew what you were going to say, but that one's way worse.
Yeah, wait. What did you think I was going to say? That was the one that kept me up.
There was another line, and I really do not remember it, but he basically said something like, Lestat, when he wanted to buy things, he still couldn't actually like fit the bill. So he's basically saying like when Lestat had money, he still was not like classy enough. He didn't have the air of someone who truly had wealth or something.
Yeah.
And I thought that one was really pompous and arrogant, and it's a totally different type of thought that Louis would have.
And that's something that you definitely don't see in the movie.
No.
Book Louis is definitely has a real jerk side to him that does not come like they softened him a lot.
They did.
Because even after all the drama in Paris, when he is doing his world tour romance with Armand, he even says in the book, you know, I just wish he would go away sometime. And I'm like, listen, when you've spent 2 years of a COVID world in a small New York City apartment, then you can have those sort of thoughts for a little bit. But you can literally go anywhere in the world, and you chose him. You're gonna live forever. You chose him.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. Is Interview with the Vampire just high fidelity in a different structure? We're just seeing Louis with all of these different people, and the spoiler alert is he's the asshole every time.
Yes. 100%. He is the John Cusack.
looks at Armand. We should go away sometimes.
I'm gonna go listen to some records.
He calls up Armand. Hey, so why do you think the relationship didn't work?
Yeah. Well, he goes back to Lestat at the end of the book.
He does.
He does it.
He
Oh my
does.
God, he does it. He goes back and he's like, oh, I just wanted to see you one more time. No! Break it off clean. That's a problematic relationship.
How did you organize your records this time? Yeah. Vampire relationships.
Oh my God.
No, Armand is interesting because, yeah, they have a actual relationship. They really do go on the Louis Armand world tour.
Yeah. And I think Louis needed that.
Yeah.
As problematic as it was. Like, I think he definitely needed somebody who understood him and didn't try to force him to be anything he wasn't, because Lestat tried to make him his.
Right.
Claudia used him
possessive.
for money and slavery. Yeah. Like,
Right.
she knew she couldn't survive on her own. And she used Louis for his cash because she made him stay at that super fancy hotel. They remodeled the hotel, for Christ's sakes.
Well, but Claudia is interesting because she really did have certain qualities that Lestat had.
Yeah.
And then she also, but she wasn't quite as like cruel. Like Lestat, I think, was a little bit more like violent in his like cruelty and was possibly even more childish than Claudia, because I think Claudia was playing chess while he's playing checkers. Like he thought he was smarter than he was.
Yeah. Oh, and we should talk about the new vampire rules.
You sound exhausted.
Well, I thought about it because there was, as we were talking about Claudia, I was thinking about the woman that, her new companion that she demands that she has. And there is a scene where they talk about her working and her sweat is blood. So I think it's time for us to talk about the new vampire rules, because we did this with Twilight. You know, we know they sparkle, their teeth have venom, some of them have superpowers. Cool. Here, with Interview with the Vampire, they're kind of more traditional vampire rules.
Very much so. They have to sleep in coffins. Sunlight makes them more than sparkle. It's a real problem.
It makes them explode. And that's also different in the book and the movie.
Yeah, they kind of oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I don't mean to skip to the movie, but when he lights them all on fire and they start popping like popcorn.
That one guy just pops out of that coffin and is like, woo!
Yeah. So I'm sorry. That image popped in my head and I started laughing.
But yeah, when they're in the book, are we doing book vampire rules or movie vampire rules or both? Because the sun rule is different in the movie than it is in the book.
Yeah. You can do book and then we can talk about it different.
We'll talk movie when we get to the movie. In the book, the sun rule is that only the dead body gets burned. Everything else remains. Which I thought that was like creative and an interesting way to look at it. Like, oh, here's a big pile of clothes. What happened here? So if you ever come into my apartment, it's not dirty laundry. It's just a bunch of vampires that saw the sun.
I love that excuse.
And that's what I'm going to start using now. What's that? Oh, it's a vampire who saw the sun. Don't worry about it. They also have to drink blood. And they have to drink the blood of a vampire to be turned into a vampire.
Right.
Which is different from the Twilight rule, which was the venom in their teeth turns people into a vampire.
Okie dokie.
Yeah. You can't drink the blood of the dead. That's the vampire rule.
They are fast. They're still fast as fuck.
Oh boy. They are, and bodily fluids like tears and sweat are now tinged with blood.
Another one that I think is cool is that when they die, they experience like a full, almost like a decomposition where it's explained that like all of the human fluids are leaving and like the organs are changing and stuff, which I think is really cool and takes longer. It's not something that happens in 40 seconds. It's like a longer process. I always kind of like when vampires take longer than that. Like when it's a vampire, and usually it's in a movie, of course, when it's almost like zombies. Like you just bite and then in a very short period of time, they're a vampire. But I kind of think it's interesting when the vampire transformation takes longer because I like the idea that the actual body is going through some sort of decomposition process.
Yeah, that it's actually dying and being reborn.
Yeah, I think it's cool.
Because it also makes more sense in that respect. Like, the instantaneous stuff, I understand why you need it as a device. But I always just assumed, like, if something like that were to happen in real life, not saying that vampires aren't real for all you vampire listeners out there in the Pacific
Nikki,
Northwest.
don't lie. We can't let them know what we know.
Oh, forget I said anything. But I always just imagined it would take longer because they're not drinking a lot of vampire blood. But the vampire is basically draining you of all of your blood. Like, your body needs to process the new blood that you just took in and then create new blood. Mm-hmm. Like, a blood transfusion isn't something that people go into the hospital for and it's like, in and out, bye.
Yeah.
That takes a while. So I just assumed everything vampiric took a long time.
It's also cool because he almost like he equates it to sex, which I find interesting with all the different relationships.
Yeah.
And how it is like penetration, like the teeth into the skin is like a form of that. So that's kind of weird. And he relates it to sex. And then it's also like he's slowly almost like getting high or something. Like everything is really bright and loud. Everything is just a lot stronger, but it's like a process where it almost like gradually gets, louder for him.
Yeah, and that's what I mean, like, the prose that Anne Rice uses, especially when describing the transformation scene, I think it's amazing. And
I
also
agree.
that each transformation is different per person.
Right.
Because Louis can remember every instant of what happened to him. Mm-hmm. Claudia remembers nothing.
Yeah.
And then when they turn, I can't remember her name.
Mama.
No, when they turn the woman towards the end of the book to be Claudia's new companion, Claudia's worried because Louis like, she's dying.
Yeah.
And there was always an opportunity that, like, if she couldn't accept it, if she tried to fight it off, she would die.
Right.
So it's this neat dynamic that it's not a cut and paste job on vampires. Not every vampire experiences it the same way. Mm-hmm. And I think it's same with life.
Yeah. I do think that it's interesting that Claudia doesn't remember it because she was also so young at 5. So if her mind is aging somewhat normally with the years as they go by, then you don't necessarily remember everything when you're 5. And that would be such a trauma and such a traumatic time that maybe she even like, did the memory repression thing.
Yeah.
There is a beauty to the vampires. So they have Louis has the really bright green eyes, and then their skin goes like totally white.
Yeah. But also, like, it's white, but then, like, when they feed, it's like they come back with like a normal human flush because they're constantly feeding before they go out into big groups in public. So they kind of blend in a little bit more. I did think it was interesting that they, in my mind, when it comes to vampires, I just assume, like, especially coming off of Twilight, where Edward's always like, I'm never cold, blah, 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 whatever, because his skin's cold. There's a scene in this book with Louis and Armand where they light a fire. and they're holding their hands over the fire for warmth, and I was like, why? You dead. What is wrong with you?
Well, that could be like a plot hole thing. Like that could maybe be an accident, or, and this is why lines like these are good. He does say how certain things that scared him when he was a human are no longer applicable. Like the fear is actually just gone, or it almost feels like when people like lose a limb and then they've got the phantom limb.
Yeah.
Like the feelings of being human sometimes come in just because of like muscle memory.
Yeah. Well, and that's really apparent too, because at the end of that scene, the only way to get down was to like jump, and he was worried that he was going to like die. And Armand's like, if you fall, you're just gonna feel like pain for a couple days. You're immortal.
Do you think Armand's like, dumb fuck?
Basically. It's like, I waited 400 years for this guy.
Oh my God. It's like he started dating Superman. He was like, but if I fall, I'll die.
Yeah.
No, you won't. And then Superman's like, could you please leave me alone? What a dick.
Yeah. I need to be with my thoughts. Oh, my glasses. You're Superman. You don't need them. When it comes to Claudia, I have a question about Claudia for you. If Lestat had not been as possessive and crazy, do you think that there was a chance that she would have killed Louis instead?
Oh, interesting. You know what? That's actually really interesting.
Because she was mad at both of them.
She was.
She was very mad at both of them and ran away for a long period of time. And it's something that I was thinking about because really, I feel like she clung to Louis because Louis was, like you said, the more motherly figure. But was he more motherly because Lestat was more dictator?
Right. And like we've been saying, like Louis is not, he's more complicated and he does have these darker sides to his personality. So if you lighten up Lestat a little bit, then the shortcomings in Louis's personality and parenting probably would have been more evident.
Yeah. Because I don't want her to kill Louis. But I also don't want her to kill Lestat either. Like, there's a weird... I have feelings about Lestat that are weird.
Oh, really?
We'll talk about it when we get into the movie. But it's just...
If the book and the movie don't make you feel sexually uncomfortable at least once, then are you really watching it?
Listen, we're going to talk all about Brad Pitt in a minute, okay? But right now, we're still talking about the book. Because she had ample opportunity. She actually once... This was the other thing that I found interesting about the book is that a lot of the stuff that carried into the movie is super extended in the book. There are years that go by between certain events that the film, which we will talk about, makes look like days or seconds even. Mm-hmm. And once she has her own companion and she knows that Louis could leave her at any minute, I mean, what was to stop her from, besides those other vampires, like, take those vampires out of the equation. Mm-hmm. She got into an argument with Louis too. Yeah. I mean, what really could have stopped her from killing him as well? Like, she's killed before. But
this is the tragedy of Claudia. She can only do so much. Mm-hmm. She is someone who, she needs a familiar. Like, she has to have someone else. Gizmo. Come here, Gizmo.
Gizmo.
It's so hard to do Interview the Vampire and not constantly think about What We Do in the Shadows because they've taken so much from all of this. Yeah. And it's like, Yeah, it's hard. Like, I was thinking about when I found out she was 5, I'm like, holy shit, 5 is so young. And then there's the part in the movie, What We Do in the Shadows,
Oh, the baby?
No, when Vladislav, they see the 2 little girls in New Zealand, and he's like, you going to go kill some pedophiles? And he's like, cool. Like, and I was like, man, this is fucked up. But
Yeah.
anyways, okay. What was I talking about? Where was I?
Claudia's flaws.
Claudia's tragedy is that she has to have somebody else. She can't just kill everybody. She's going to run out of options really fast. Like, what do you do at that point? And I don't know. It just makes it very sad.
Yeah. Well, and that's also like Lestat threatens her earlier in the book about how he could make another one.
Yeah.
Doesn't need her. He can make others. And she's like, what are you going to do? Populate the world with vampires?
Right.
And it really shows that, I think, really is mirrored to her in Paris, where you realize that Lestat has no power in New Orleans. And Claudia has no power in Paris. But they both think that they have something.
Right.
They are definitely father-daughter material. And I wonder if that's because she drank his blood. Like, if she had drank from Louis, would she have absorbed some of the softness of him?
Interesting. That's interesting. And it's kind of like, you know how in Falcon and Winter Soldier, when they have the super soldier serum, it just increases the stuff in your personality already. So Cap was just a really good person, so he's an even greater person. And then the other guy had his like PTSD and everything, so all of that gets heightened.
Yeah.
It's like, what if, though, Louis being kind of a dick, and you're saying that they're almost like mirror images, what if some of that was heightened?
Oh my God, I could not live with that girl. I can see it now, and I'm just like, I'm good. But also, she'd be really good with money. So maybe stocks and bonds. She'd be like, I'm going to get stock in Apple. But yeah, I mean, that's because that's one of the things that they talk a lot about, is that that's their daughter. It's both of them. It took both of them to make her, is what they basically say a lot of during their time in New Orleans. And it's, I mean, that is something that I would really like an answer to. Like, if Louis had given his blood instead, what kind of Claudia would we have had? Would she have been so headstrong and so gung-ho about certain things? Like, would she have lived?
I don't know.
Listen, we're leaving a lot of questions out there for the people. Oh my goodness. There's so much about this book, but I will say, towards the end, when Louis does the stupid thing and goes, you know, texts a you up message to Lestat, basically, like, girl, you're in a better place. You have Armand. Yeah. Don't do this. And then he waits 50 years to tell Armand that he even saw Lestat. I don't want to get into it. Problematic relationships all around. When he meets Lestat, I will say 100%, I was worried that they were going to turn that baby into a vampire, and all I kept thinking was, it was bad enough having a 5-year-old with an adult brain. Could you imagine having a screaming baby for thousands of years?
That's what we do in the Shadows the first season. Like, you change a baby into a vampire.
Like, I can't wrap my head around that concept. And while I was reading it, I was really focusing on what was being said, but I was also like, oh God, please don't turn the baby. Oh God, please don't turn the baby. Don't drink the baby and don't turn the baby.
I thought that the baby was cool, and I read it as a bit of a throwback to the baby and all the children eating in Dracula.
Oh.
See?
Wow. Look at you. Miss Academic over here. Okay.
I like the baby. Good baby.
Un petit bébé. I had to do it in French because, you know, Louis. The baby part threw me, and then the super aggressive nature of the interviewer at the end of the book.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the book, Louis has told this entire story. It's sad, it's hard. You know, Louis talks about how he had to give up so much in his life. And then this interviewer is still like, but you had all this power. I would take that power. And then he's kind of like, I'm like, you just listen to a vampire tell you all this stuff and you're going to fight him?
Yeah. Why do you think that's a good idea?
That would be like if I made Jesse go have a fist fight with The Rock. Like, that's not going to end well. Like, it was very jarring. Because up until that point, the interviewer has just been us, basically.
Right.
And that's where I felt unnerved, because I was like, I associated myself with the interviewer the whole time, because those are the questions I would be asking too as the book is progressing. Like, so he made a child so you would stay? Like, that's messed up. All these same questions that, you know, the boy had, I kind of had. And then we get to the end and the boy's like, make me a vampire. And I was like, oh, no. Oh, no. Now I remember we're two different people. I'm not with him.
He is referenced as the boy. Like, he sounds like he is younger. Yeah.
And that's, when we talk about it in the movie, I have a question right off the bat about that. But,
okay.
But the gall of the boy to be like, well, so Louis leaves, and then the boy's like, well, you told me where to find Lestat, and that's the end of the book.
Yes, then he just goes searching for Lestat.
I was like, holy crap, you have some balls. Yeah,
I told me where he's at.
Yeah, you told me what to do. You basically pushed me in this direction.
You did this.
Yeah. Oh my God, he's gonna turn into another Louis. He's gonna whine the whole time.
I'm telling you, it's just the cycle. Yeah. It's the cycle of trauma. It just keeps going in all these different relationships.
It really does, and it's all because of Louis.
But also, what did Louis think he was going to gain from telling someone this whole thing and not killing them or turning them?
I don't know, but do you think that Louis is ready to die at that point?
Yeah. Okay. I do think that something happens to Louis where there is a different type of energy that he has. And then I think when Claudia dies, I just think that Louis is different at that point.
Yeah.
And maybe having Armand around is just almost like a rebound that he did for a little while. And now he's just a different type of damaged.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Because it's mentioned, I think Armand is the one who tells him one day a vampire will just leave and you won't know where he went, and you won't know what he did. And someone will go out into a field and they'll just find basically a pile of clothes. So when it got to the end and Louis just disappears on the interviewer, I guess my takeaway from it, especially after that scene, after Armand describes like how a vampire can kill himself, and then we get to the end and he's trying to find a way where if he were to walk out into the sun, someone would know his story. And that someone isn't Lestat who's gonna like butcher it.
And I do like the way that the book addresses the passage of time and how we experience it, and the play on like the bodies and the ages and how they're not always the same, but also how you lose yourself. Like Louis is annoyed because he's being viewed as more modern, and he doesn't believe he even connects to now, which I think is so fascinating, because a lot of times as people, you look back at like a certain era and you're like, oh, that was so cool. But the people in that era thought, oh, nothing's right now. It's, it was better in the past. And it's like this continuing thing of not being happy in the moment.
Yeah.
And he's like, they're all kind of fearing that in different ways.
Oh yeah, they do bring that up too, where it's like the vampires want to be forever, but only forever in that time period. You know, then like trolleys change to cars and cars change to airplanes, and it's this weird dichotomy between what you've lived your entire life as and then what the world is becoming now. I mean, I feel like you and I can relate to that a little bit. Like we were definitely on the cusp of what it meant to have no internet, to having dial-up, to having internet. I can go to the grocery store and have internet. I'm not tied to anything. That just made me sound so old saying it. I can go to the grocery store and have internet. But, like, we are, I don't know, we're living kind of, I don't want to say we're living that vampiric life. Like, I'm not drinking blood or anything, but I understand this weird passage of time where it's both stretched out and squished at the same time.
Yeah, and also the feeling, I think, of being relevant, the feeling of, like, fitting in and everything. Like, you think about how people have difficulty sending an Excel file as an attachment in an email, and they're only, like, 40.
Yeah.
And then you think about a vampire who's been living during, 1700s, 1800s, and then everything that's happened with technology in the last 100 years and how we can barely keep up with it.
Yeah.
And we're not even a quarter of their age.
It's crazy.
It is. It's cool.
It is really cool. It is neat to think about it in that way. But it also just makes me feel old.
Well, and there's a really cool moment when, at the end, when Louis is talking about how he goes to the Louvre and how he sees these old paintings and they're just in these gilded frames and they're stuck there forever. And then he thinks about Claudia and how she was stuck there, but that even though they were preserved for a period of time, ultimately they'll all end up the same, just dust.
Yeah.
So even though they have more time and they think of themselves as being eternal or undying, it'll still happen. It just hasn't happened yet. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing as the rest of us.
I feel like this is where we insert dust in the wind.
This book is definitely a feel-good, am I right?
Oh, yeah. Most def. There's not a downer part at all. Okay, so now let's pivot. We got, and this is really interesting because we've got page to screen alumni in this movie.
I know. I thought the same thing. I didn't even realize it until I saw them on screen.
I had completely forgot who was in the movie.
We really didn't. We just didn't think about it. We didn't connect it.
We didn't connect the dots.
Yeah. Yeah, so we are now turning to the Interview with the Vampire adaptation that came out 1994. Basically the same plot. There are definitely differences that we will talk about, but same players and same basic timeline. It is directed by Neil Jordan, who at this point was hot off of doing The Crying Game. Mm-hmm. It stars Tom Cruise as Lestat, Brad Pitt as Louis, Kirsten Dunst as Claudia, and then you also have Stephen Ray and Antonio Banderas. One thing I want to say real quick is just that it is so impressive to watch this movie because it's truly an epic. And when you're so used to watching the older vampire films, it's just like Christopher Lee running around an empty castle somewhere. And there's not exactly sets. They'll have like one candelabra and some curtains in the back. And the scope of this film is so impressive. You've got giant sets. They filmed on location in San Francisco, New Orleans. They were
in Paris too.
Yeah, they were in Paris. It's really big. There's a lot of costumes. It doesn't feel cheap at all. And I read that Neil Jordan said that he wanted this to be the Gone with the Wind of vampire films. And I think that is absolutely, exactly what he achieved.
Well, he also, there is a credit on the screen for Anne Rice for screenplay.
And it is a lie.
It is a big fat lie. Neil went in and rewrote almost the entire script. Which I would love to read her original. Mm-hmm. Like whatever she submitted first off, would love to read.
Yeah.
And also, can we talk about the fact that Thandie Newton's in this?
I know. And wait, how do you say her name? Because I think Thandie's the name that they like gave
Oh,
her.
yeah.
We should. Thandui.
Yeah,
Thandui Newton.
Thandie Newton.
Yes. But yeah, she is in it, and it is so cool to see her.
She's so young.
So young.
And it's funny because we started the movie and Jesse paused it on the credit scene while we went to do something else, and I turned around and her name was on the screen and I was like, I'm sorry, what? No, she's not. And Christian Slater plays who was once the boy. He now has a name. Mallory? Malloy?
Yeah, he's the interviewer.
Yeah, he's the interviewer. But he
Yeah.
took over for Rest in Peace River Phoenix, who I think would have been bomb.com in this. Listen, that
I
made
think
me
he would have
old.
been so good.
He would have been brilliant. And every time I watch this movie, I think about that because there are certain scenes where you look at Christian Slater's face and it looks almost like River Phoenix.
Yeah.
And it kind of like takes you aback for a minute. You're like, holy crap. But he would have been stunning in it.
Well, and I think that he has more of a softness to him.
Yeah.
Like, I think that would have been really interesting with the continuation of these male characters. And I think that the connection would have been different between him and Brad Pitt.
Yeah. Just to start off this whole thing, here's where, following from the book, this was my main question because the book doesn't answer this, and neither does the movie, really. The book kind of jumps right in with the interview in place. We don't know how they met. They don't know what they're doing, you know? Mm-hmm. The movie starts off, and he describes he saw him down the alley, and he was looking for him. Which, when you go back to the book and there are these, it's not really homoerotic nature in the book. A lot of people want to paint it like that. But there is this sort of sexual nature happening. Is that the same thing that's happening here? Are we to believe that the interviewer could possibly be gay and was looking for?
Well, let's think about this in a different way. I think it's fascinating that the book was published in the mid-1970s.
Yeah.
Mid-1970s, if you're walking around in the types of cities that are in Interview with the Vampire, I think it's definitely a different tone. And even if you've got someone who's the quote-unquote interviewer, but to be like young, like a boy, he's referred to as the boy, and he's walking around in the middle of the night in the 1970s in San Francisco.
Yeah. Okay, so that
if you
answers
found
my
out
question.
someone, yeah, if you found out someone was doing that, I think that has some indications.
But then the weird part comes in where it's like, once they met up in that alley, what did he say? Hey, you want to come back to my place so I can record you talking about your life?
Yeah.
Like, how did this? I guess I just need one extra scene where someone explains to me how this happened.
Yeah.
Like, could you imagine going out? You're just out and about, and some guy sees you and is like, hey, girl. And you're like, hey. And you're like, can I bring you back to my place so I can interview you? No. It's like, not like stranger danger.
But see, that's kind of a cool vibe that they could do, because we'll get into it, I'm sure, but they are adapting this again for AMC.
Yeah.
But the idea of two guys in the middle of the night in San Francisco walking up to each other, and one of them says, what do you do? I'm an interviewer.
Yeah.
Would you like to interview me? Sure, let's go back to my place.
See, that sounds, that's a scenario that I feel like probably happened. And I think that's interesting to see.
Because it could go a lot of different ways.
Yeah. I just want to see a little bit of that. But that was
for the different ways, it bridges the overtones.
Yeah.
Where one of the ways is to kill him, and the other way is that maybe it's a sexual nature, but it's neither, and instead it's just companionship for the night and speaking to another human.
Yeah.
And that's what the vampires seek from each other.
That is true. That's why they create others.
Yeah.
Brad.
We're only in like minute 5.
Yeah, we're not even in the whole movie yet. I mean, I didn't even get to say Brad Pitt's hair. My God, Brad Pitt's hair. I saw it and I was like, how do I get my locks to be so shiny?
I know.
God, turn me into a vampire then. My God, my hair's dull right now. Make me look pretty.
I do love, and this is in Twilight too, but I love the idea that when you become a vampire, you become the best version of yourself.
Yeah. You're doing it.
Yeah.
We had just talked about this too. I think it's an amazing idea that all of these people seem to have the same sort of premise, that when you are turned into a vampire, it's like your dream physical form of being a vampire. Mm-hmm. Turn me now. Someone.
Well, and because part of what they have to do is be both predator and prey. They have to be able to lure someone in to attack them.
Yeah. I did read that former Born on the 4th of July wheelchair user Tom Cruise, he said that when he was prepping for this role, he watched a lot of videos of lions and lionesses hunting.
Yeah.
And it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And let me just say, this is my favorite Tom Cruise performance.
Same.
Yeah.
There is something about the hair and the teeth that work for him.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think he's great in this movie, and I noticed that at the end of the movie when Louis finds Lestat in the like broken down place, that there are big lion statues in the front.
Oh, that's so funny.
Even like the way his hair is, it's all like big, and then it's not mentioned in the movie, but Lestat's name in the Vampire Chronicles is what? De Lion Court?
Yeah.
So there's definitely like a lion theme that Lestat is working.
That's so funny. I love that. I didn't even pick up on those lines. That's so great.
Yeah.
This is where from page to screen, the characters kind of differ, because Louis is now supposed to be like a Spaniard. What? Okay, Brad Pitt.
Some of the accents, the accents in this movie, if you were an actor and you were like, I need to learn this accent, who's a really good actor who does this accent, do not look at this movie, because they are all questionable.
Oh my God, when he says New Orleans at the beginning of the movie, Jesse looked at me and went, okay.
Well, and my favorite is when we get to Stephen Ray at the Vampire Theater. He's an Irish actor doing like the most French accent. And because he's Irish, he's got those hard R's, and they come out and they just make me laugh.
He sounds like the French chef from The Little Mermaid.
He does. He does. It's very funny. And then like sometimes it kind of works. Like Armand, his accent is all over the place, but in a way I like it. I kind of like when it's an older, like it's something like of a cheat in Highlander, because you've got a main character who cannot do any accent, but he's trying them all. But in a way it works because he's been around for so long. You know?
I feel like with Armand it works because he has traveled everywhere. So he would have picked up a little bit here and there to try and fit in with everybody. Yeah. But for Louis,
our main stars,
it's just like no. But along with changing him from being completely French to whatever he's supposed to be now, they soften him a lot. Like we mentioned, it's the death of his wife and daughter that really pushes him to the edge. And
Which is a lot more simple. Yeah. And it's almost a girlfriend in the refrigerator. And it also sets the tone that he is not as gay, maybe, because you give him a heterosexual relationship immediately.
Yeah, he's no longer sobbing about the death of a man. He's sobbing about the death of a woman. It's a whole
thing.
Yeah. But Lestat, from page to screen, like chef's kiss. It is.
Yeah.
there is more to him, and this is where I'm like, I wish the father figure could have worked on screen to add to this, because there's a scene where Lestat brings Louis to that rich people party, and he goes off with the dandy, and Louis goes off with the old lady, and before they all like separate and stuff, Lestat explains that he can actually, oh, here's a new vampire rule, Lestat can read thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows that this woman murdered like her husband and blamed one of her slaves. And that slave was, subsequently murdered for the death of this white person. And Lestat makes it sound like in that scene that, yes, he is attacking and killing all these people, which Louis finds to be repulsive, but he's only killing people he thinks deserves to be killed. He's like a justice warrior. He's like Batman in a way, but he kills the bad guys.
Yeah, but he also, it's kind of like in Rope when you've got the two boys and they think that they are better than others, therefore those people do not deserve their lives. So Lestat also thinks that prostitutes should be murdered, and he doesn't care about a little girl because she's, basically trash anyways. So he also is his own god, which he specifically says that they are as close to God on earth, and God does not discriminate in his killing, so they don't either. So he does, but his idea is more on the chaotic side than the lawful side.
Yeah. Yes, he's not like Batman proper. He's like he's like Bizarro Batman. He kills who he thinks. He is both judge and jury when he is killing these people. And he's just using his own day of like hour of the day judgment to kill these people. But it was interesting because in addition to that, in the book he's kind of really needy of Louis, and in the movie he's kind of his own individual, and he's also the funniest thing. He is so sarcastic. He is what speaking of killing of, old-timey sex workers, when he puts that girl in a coffin and he takes her out and she's like, "A coffin," and he's like, "Oh, so it is. You must be dead." I can't stop laughing.
I think that scene is so disturbing, and but I love it. Like, it's so disturbing, but I think it's done really well. You and I have talked outside of this about like Rob Zombie and stuff, and I just find myself over the years, I don't like prolonged scenes of torture. I find it to be really kind of grotesque after a while, unless there is a point to it. And Louis is more, I would say, like boring in the movie.
Yeah.
But he also acts as like the audience's eyes for watching this torture. So these scenes of playing with people and murdering people is played out in the horror on Louis' face. And I think that is like so effective because like there's the part when he's doing that to her and throwing her in the coffin, and you see Louis actually like put his hand to his mouth.
Yeah.
Like,
and
he's
like,
going to
turns
cry
away.
out. Yeah. That's rough.
Yeah. This film visually, like, it is, I would 100% agree that this is definitely the Gone with the Wind of vampire films.
Yeah.
This holds a special place in the whole, like, vampire genre. And I think it's because you made the vampires human. Like, when we did Dracula, Dracula's just kind of like a standoffish, kind of superhuman. But we get more humanistic, feelings when it comes to both Lestat and Louis in the movie.
And I think it's like a rose with thorns, because I like the monstrous vampires. I like Salem's Lot. Like, I like the monster that they end up becoming. And it is cool though with this movie that you get a more human side of it, more complicated. You're experiencing the emotions of someone who would have lived this long, and you certainly don't get all of that from something like Dracula. But I don't think you get Twilight without Interview with the Vampire. So
Yeah.
was it a good thing? Because now vampires are so just dumbed down to being just whiny, and it's more about relationships than about having to kill people
Yeah.
all the time.
Well, I think that a lot of people are taking from Louis versus taking from the whole.
Yeah.
Like because we're with Louis during the entire film, I feel like a lot of people are like, that's what people want. And it's like, I know in the last episode we did say that we don't want a Vin Diesel. We want a sparkly vampire who can play us a song that they wrote for us. Yes. But we want that heightened to more of a Brad Pitt, gorgeous hair, Interview with the Vampire style vampire, not a Twilight vampire. There's a lot of stuff in the film and in the book, but we're talking about the film, where, vampires aren't nice.
No.
Vampires are catty and mean. Vampires are more like the cast of Mean Girls than they are the cast of Twilight.
Well, some of the deaths are really hard to watch. So it's like the two sex workers. Later on in the stage show.
Oh, that's really difficult.
Yeah, it's difficult to watch. And all of it is also dressed up in sex too. So it makes it even more complicated when you have women being shown that way. So there's a lot of like different thoughts when you see it. But then they start to do something where they make the deaths funny. So Claudia, once she gets turned, is like a psycho killer, and her and Lestat are just killing people constantly.
Yeah.
And they do this like montage of death. And it's so funny. I laugh every time when she kills the lady and then Lestat comes in and then he's like, no, no, no. And just hits her on the wrist. It's so funny.
It is.
But then you're like, well, wait a minute. What am I laughing at here?
I know. Well, it's that unnerving sort of thing where we're watching it and we're like, this shouldn't be as funny as it is. Like when Lestat picks up Claudia's mom, her dead body, and is dancing her around, is like, there's still life in the old girl yet. I'm like, this is the funniest vampire movie I've ever seen.
And when you see Claudia and her mom, it is so disturbing.
Yeah.
It's like the little baby kittens with a dead mommy. Like, it's just the most disturbing thing. And it was the first time I watched this movie, I remember jumping when it cuts to the mom because I just wasn't expecting it. And she's really like decomposed, and it's almost like a jump scare when you see her. So then to see him just kind of like defile her body and dancing it around, but then it's kind of funny. It's really fucked up.
Yeah, it's this weird juxtaposition.
Yeah.
Between what's really happening and that's where you're kind of like, oh, Lestat's this awful person. He just doesn't care. But it's weird because there's so many layers. Vampires are like onions. But Lestat, we're not supposed to connect to him. We're supposed to connect to Louis because that's our main character. That's the heart of the story. But I found myself constantly drawn. Maybe I was under his spell. I don't know. Maybe he hypnotized me. But there is something about the way Tom Cruise played him that I want to see so much more of it. Especially Claudia in the book and in the movie kills him. And it's the same way in both. But when he comes back and is sitting at that piano and he's like,
I love that
when
scene.
He just says she's been a very naughty girl.
Yes.
I was just like, this is, and the makeup.
Yeah, the makeup's great.
Was it Stan Winston makeup on him is just phenomenal. Like it's probably one of my favorite makeup looks in any vampire film.
And it's cool to see how he looks when he's fine, like at the beginning of the movie, and then when she slices his throat and they have the animatronic
Yeah.
Tom Cruise and the skins falling in, and then you see when he's at the piano, and then finally at the end when you see where he's still not quite right yet, like he's still very skeletal looking. I love all of those transitions for him.
Yeah. Where is animatronic Tom Cruise? Does
Wait,
anyone
what?
know where he went? The animatronic Tom Cruise.
Oh,
We talk about this whole thing with animatronic Tom Cruise and how he's like dead-ish, and then they set all of New Orleans on fire. All of that in the movie is like 20 minutes. Between maybe 30 minutes, Louis turning into a vampire to Claudia and Louis leaving New Orleans. Maybe like 20, 40, maybe let's give it the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's like 45 minutes long. That's like 800 pages in the book. Like, it extends forever, and they live in New Orleans for years. They rent out the shop below them. Like, there's whole backstories and whole situations that happened. And I understand cutting it down for time, but there's a lot of stuff that does get missed. Like, there's that weird musician kid who was obsessed with Claudia.
Well, think about what Neil Jordan said. He said he wanted to do Gone with the Wind. And Interview the Vampire, while the book length is not nearly as long as Gone with the Wind, because that's like 1,000 pages, there is just a lot that happens in different times and throughout a lot of different locations. And this is, like 2 hours and 3 minutes, I think?
Yeah. So
Gone with the Wind is almost 4 hours.
Yeah.
It's a long movie. So if you're going to do an epic, maybe he did need a little bit more time. And they even, when they showed this, they ended up cutting 20 minutes. And part of it was because the audience said that it was too gory, I think. It was too bloody, which that makes me mad. But maybe had this been closer to a 3-hour movie, you would get more from the book.
Yeah. Oprah walked out of the premiere because she thought there was too much blood.
It's not that bad.
It's not that much. I was like,
it's okay.
I was like, hi, have you seen Saw? No? Okay.
I think Oprah's being a little dramatic.
Yeah, it wasn't that much blood. And also, I want that pointy thimble thing. I don't want to stab anybody with it, but I just want to wear one.
Well, just imagine how naughty it could be at Whole Foods, just putting a little pointy thing in grapes, eating stuff around.
No, oh my God, every time I get a package in the mail, give me my pointy thimble. Slice them all open. Oh my God, that'd be so much fun.
I do think that this movie holds up. When we're talking about the special effects, I think all of the effects in this movie work really well. I don't think it's really dated. Like, I don't think it's aged too poorly, even though there are certain aspects that are very 90s. It doesn't feel old. Like, I still feel like it's good enough to a production today.
Oh, I agree. It's funny because I didn't even notice a lot of the special effects. Like, especially like when Claudia cuts off all her hair, or even when she turns into a vampire. It's not something that was like jarring. It didn't look that wrong, watching it today.
I thought it was cool. I love that part when she turns and you see her get all like Shirley Temple.
I have a question for you. Were you pretty young when you saw this movie for the first time?
No, actually. I don't think I saw this movie until I was like 12 or 13.
Yeah, I think I was definitely somewhere between 10 and 12.
Yeah.
I wanted every outfit
that
Claudia wears, especially when they go to the theater in Paris. And I was like, I'm going to get me one of them. I'm going to get me one. I still, to this day, watching this movie, I was like, how do I get that pink dress with all the little roses on it? With the matching satin shoes.
All of her dresses are so cute. And then at the end, when it's her and the newly made mom, and they're in those blue and green. Oh my God, those dresses are so beautiful.
Absolutely stunning. Costuming for this film was spot on. And it's really fun when you compare that to the book, because it wasn't something I realized until watching the movie. In the book, they make a point that all the French vampires only wear black. And it's true. When you're watching the movie, it's like, oh, yeah, everyone's really wearing a lot of dark clothing. Like, this is weird. But it's not something you would pick up if you didn't read it in the book first, where they were like, and apparently they all dyed their hair. All the French vampires have black hair and black clothing because they want to move like a shadow. Mm-hmm. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, there's those little tiny things that carried over so perfectly from the book to the movie.
And what's funny is there's so much of the script for the movie is from the book. I mean, when he's talking about like saying goodbye to the sunset, and when he is speaking to Armand, it's funny because it's a lot of the same stuff, except it might just be missing like one sentence. So it really is like a very condensed adaptation.
Was there any one part, because there's one for me, but is there any one part that you wish would have been in the film that wasn't?
Yeah, I think I would have liked to see Louis and Armand more. Mm-hmm. I would have liked to see all of that section a little bit longer, because I just think that Antonio Banderas is really cool in this movie. Like, he's a whole mood. Yeah. A whole mood, whole vibe. And it would have maybe been cool to see a gay couple going out and experiencing the world together.
Yeah, that would have been fun. I would have liked to see, like, their world tour.
Yeah.
Not like a montage of snapshots or anything, but you know what I mean.
Armand's holding the map.
Upside down.
Yeah, so silly. 80s montage.
They're so cute.
Aw.
I really
picks up a pebble in Greece and just coquettishly throws it at Louis.
They're having so much kind of like Lestat throwing those grapes at him at the beginning of the movie. No, there's a scene in the book that I really wanted to be in the movie, and that was Lestat in France at the theater as kind of the reason behind why Louis is actually captured.
Right.
Because that added such a different dynamic to it. It was just a little bit deeper because because I guess that goes hand in hand with having more Armand in the film as well. Mm-hmm. Because Armand explains all that stuff to Louis, like, well, you called him a buffoon, which he does in the movie too, which I thought was really funny. Great throwback. But it's one of those things where I just wanted I don't know, maybe I just wanted a little bit more Lestat. It's just Tom Cruise is so funny, and I would love to see how he would have played that part where he's in that chair and he's just crying out to Louis, and all the other vampires are making fun of him.
No, the Lestat not being present in Paris is a huge change. Yeah. And it's one that you could actually see it working in the movie.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I thought there was a trivia where they actually filmed that scene. Mm-hmm. Because they argue in the book. And that's where Louis, it's like a weird love triangle moment in the book where Louis has to choose between leaving with Lestat or going with Armand. And he chooses Armand. So much drama for one vampire.
I know, it really is. It's like a soap opera.
Honestly, it really is. And we briefly touched on the fact that AMC is doing a TV show, like a series of this. And I wonder if it's going to be loosely based on the series, or if they're going to try and do a really, like, a sprawling, epic adaptation, because that's the one scene. If they are doing it as, like, a really big adaptation, this is the one scene I want.
Well, I think it's interesting that they've announced who they have cast for Lestat and Louis, but oh, wait, no, they did announce a Claudia.
Yeah, they did.
I don't think that they've announced an Armand. So if it's a TV series, well, no, is it 8 episodes or is it, like, ongoing?
I don't think they've announced how long it is. I think they have 8 episodes confirmed, but that could mean anything, you know? Like, if it's really good, they could continue.
You could do the entire book in 8 episodes, or
Yeah.
if they're doing what AMC does and what they've done with Walking Dead and Preacher, they take like the basics of it, but then kind of run off. At some point, it goes from being parallel at this point in the story to breaking off into its own like waves. And if they are doing something like that, I can see waiting for Armand until like a second season, and then you get to spend more time with Louis and Lestat, and then the two of them with Claudia.
Yeah, because Claudia's actually in a lot more books.
She is, yeah.
And I think they also mentioned, I think AMC's also adapting Anne Rice's Witch series as well.
Mm-hmm.
And those characters all live in the same universe. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that plays out.
You
on
think
a
there's
small
going to be
screen.
an Anne Rice expanded universe?
Yeah. The ARCU.
Yeah.
I had to think about that one.
I do think it's interesting that the guy that they have to play Louis is the guy who played Grey Worm in Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
Jacob Anderson. So you're having a Louis that is a person of color. And I think that that is a huge change. And it kind of corrects a little bit of the discomfort when it's like, oh, he's talking about slaves being dumb. And that's kind of messed up. But I think that's like a whole different aspect that you'll get with a TV show.
Well, isn't I think the Claudia that they chose as well.
I think so. Yeah.
So it's going to be a whole different dynamic, and I think it might play out, especially when you think about New Orleans at the time. 'Cause that's something that Lestat keeps talking about, is like, oh, good old Creole blood.
Look at that gator.
There's when we were watching it, Jesse's favorite Disney movie is The Princess and the Frog, and he likes to quote it, and he's like, "Shut up, you from Shreveport?" And I was like, Jesse, they didn't film in Shreveport. End credits. Filmed in Shreveport.
That's so funny.
I was like, shut up.
Well, it's funny because I think all of us have like a love for New Orleans, even though Carlos hasn't, my husband hasn't fully experienced it.
We have to take him.
He needs like a whole full big weekend there, but he still has a love for it, even though he hasn't yet to fully experience it. But when they're eating dinner and then the dining room table gets like flipped over and then you see all the crawfish fall, Carlos is like, not the crawfish. Well, New Orleans, I just love, and there is a total feeling that you get when you're there that if you've been there and you know what that means, because like the air is just richer, there's music playing constantly, there's a lot of history. To have it set there is just such a cool place. And then to also have places like Paris and San Francisco, they all have a vibe. And Anne Rice, I think, did a decent job explaining that. And I think that the movie also translates the areas.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that's, once again, when we talk about how Anne Rice's writing was just so good, it's like you're reading those parts about New Orleans and you're like, I get it. Especially when he goes back.
Yeah.
And he talks about like the flowers, like the honeysuckle, stuff like that. It's like, that is New Orleans. Let's go. Sorry guys, we're done with the podcast. We're going to New Orleans. We'll talk to you later. It's what I did really like about the ending to the movie is that it's almost a reverse Harry Potter. And to that I do mean we're gonna do it again in Goblet of Fire. In the book version, Dumbledore's very calm, relaxed. In the movie version, he's a nutcase. In the book version, the interviewer is a nutcase towards the end. In the movie version, he's calm and relaxed. And I was like, I appreciated that because he was still being kind of forceful about wanting to be a vampire. Um, but he almost, and like he seemed like he was gonna do the same thing like at the end of the book, you know, like he was definitely going to try and find a way. But he was also scared straight,
Yeah.
almost. And then he pops in that tape and you get to listen to Brad Pitt say New Orleans again. You know what I mean? If you have watched this movie, you know what I'm talking about. It is just so bizarre. But then to have that kind of jump scare of Lestat being in the car.
I love that part. And then they start to play the Sympathy for the Devil cover that Guns N' Roses did, which is such a good song.
Yeah.
I just love that song so much. And it's such a cool song. So when you've got the return of Lestat at the end of the movie, it kind of gives the audience a bit of an adrenaline rush with him. And it makes him like it cements him being an iconic vampire horror character.
Yeah.
It's just like such a cool moment and such a cool ending, and it is, I think, a more of an energetic ending than the book.
Yeah.
The book, I think, is still a good ending. Like, I like the idea that it's a little ambiguous and this guy's gonna go look for Lestat. Like, I think that is kind of a fun ending, but this one is just an adrenaline rush.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's such a mirror to the beginning,
Right.
where, because he literally says the same thing. He's like, I'm going to give you the choice that I never had. But he's doing it all while he's like fluffing out his sleeves. And it's so, the calm around him. This is why Tom Cruise played into this weird nuance that I didn't even get from the book. And, you know, especially after watching it, you know, watching the film again, I'm like, I definitely want to reread the book now with this idea of Tom Cruise playing it this way the entire time.
Right.
Because it's fun. He makes Lestat fun, and Lestat in the
does.
book
Yeah.
is kind of codependent, sad, mean guy. But in the movie, he's kind of like, he's like a fun guy. You know, I kind of want to...
Well, and this is where I start to struggle a bit with Brad Pitt, because I think that Brad Pitt is a good actor. And I think that his best performance may have been the other Brad Pitt movie that we've done on the podcast, which is Fight Club. I just think that he's so good in that movie.
That's peak Pitt.
That's peak Pitt.
Peak Pitt.
Yes. In all manner of things, that's peak Pitt. And here, he hated doing this movie, and he called it like 6 months of fucking darkness, because it was mostly night shoots, and he was alone, and he was on location, and it was during the winter time, and he fell into a depression. He hated the character. He complained that he liked Louis in the book, but not in the movie, which is interesting, because we would probably agree that he is a more interesting character in the book, even though he's kind of a dick. But at the same time, there's always that thing about, like, there's no bad roles. And when you look at this cast, including Tom Cruise, who I'm not a huge fan of, giving one of his greatest performances, Brad Pitt, I think, is the weakest part. I think that from an acting perspective, that he clearly didn't like the role and he didn't want to be there. And I feel that. And in a way, it's a little bit hidden because Louis doesn't want to be there either. But
yeah, it's almost like he was playing himself.
Yeah.
You could feel, and it worked for how they wrote Louis. But I you know, I do wonder if Brad Pitt had been more engaged in the role, would they have made a couple slight changes to Louis? Because he's not always broody and weird.
No, and I love the part when Claudia is dead. He goes in, he sees her, and when the way he acts when he runs out of the wherever that is, like the little torture area that they've got set up.
Chamber.
The torture chamber. When he runs out of that and he sees that it's about to be the sun, and then he just like throws himself up against the wall, you feel him being so broken and damaged, and this is his lowest low, and he's lost Claudia, and it's just heartbreaking. But that would be a better moment had he actually had like life in his eyes when he is with Claudia in Paris, because I don't think that it was there. I feel like even in Paris, there's not like a glimmer to his eye.
No, we never fully see, and I wonder if it's because of the age difference. I wonder if there was a lot of things that changed. Like, you can't really change Claudia's age that much when it goes from book to screen because she's supposed to be the child. Like Armand, you can change a little bit, 17 to, I don't know, 20-ish. That's a fine change. But I wonder if we didn't get to see a lot of the life in it because a lot of the time spent in Paris is him in love with her. They dedicate their lives to each other. They call it a marriage at one point. The only real bit of that we get, which was kind of weird, is when, 11-year-old Kirsten Dunst has her first kiss ever with Brad Pitt. I mean, would I have preferred my first kiss ever to be with Brad Pitt? Oh, yeah. Most definitely. I think a lot of people would really enjoy that. But it plays... It's that weird feeling you get in the pit of your stomach where you're like, that's a small child.
Yeah.
And I think that they probably tried to steer clear of some of the, what we previously called the pedophilia moments from the book to the screen because you don't want to alienate your audience that much. If Oprah Winfrey walked out because of too much blood, imagine if she had stayed till that part.
Yeah. With Claudia in the movie, so much of the horror for me rests not with people being murdered and what vampires do, but it really rests in just Claudia. I think that she is just so tragic.
Yeah.
And I love the dynamic between her and her two gay dads. And when she like sees the woman and they're all kind of like gawking at her, and you've got Lestat kind of like creepily saying like, oh, you found a good one or whatever, and then she's just staring at her wanting to be her, and then she ends up taking the body. It's like, what was she doing with that body? Like, was she just staring at it? Was she caressing it? Was she dressing her? Like, was she comparing? Like, that's so sad and so disturbing.
It is sad. It's knowing you're never going to do. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's something that I feel like a lot of people experience at some point in their life, but when you're a lot older. Mm-hmm. So to have that painted over a child, it's just, that is the most depressing part about it.
Yeah.
Because she should be able to grow. That's the sad part. She should have had that life, and she should be able to grow. And even Louis and Lestat come to an understanding at the end where they're both like, we should have never done that. We were very, very wrong.
It's the Arrested Development. I've made a huge mistake.
And I mentioned this in the last, when we were talking about doing this at the end of the last episode. When it comes to that point where they take them all, and Claudia is put into the sun chamber.
Yeah.
That's when I like to not want to watch anymore. Because it's just a downhill slope to sadness.
It is. It's a downward spiral.
And it's so depressing. And it's very hard to watch Claudia die.
I love watching Claudia die. I just think it's done so well.
It is.
I think it's really a cool and visually stunning moment when they're wearing those beautiful dresses and they're in that medieval looking dungeon. And I always I think, well, why wouldn't they just take off their dresses? Why wouldn't they try to hide under them or something? I don't know.
To pull from what they do in the shadows, they all wear coats in that sunroom and they're totally fine. Hide under your dress.
Yeah, and I always wondered that, but then again, you've got a new vampire who maybe doesn't even understand how they die, and then you've got someone who's still a little girl. She's still small, so her body is probably tired from what torture she's just gone through and fell asleep and didn't even think about it. So it's just so sad. And then the amazing Stan Winston sculpture of the two of them that he based off of the victims from Hiroshima, I think?
Yeah.
Right?
Or are you talking about Pompeii?
Pompeii? Oh, Pompeii. I'm thinking Pompeii.
Yeah, the volcano people, not the bomb people.
No, not the bomb people, the volcano people. So he looked at that for inspiration, and I just think it looks so cool. And even like Louis's eyes when he walks in to see them, they're even more of this like piercing, super
Yeah.
light green.
I think the thing that, okay, they almost glow in the dark, those eyes. They look neon.
Yeah.
But I think the reason it's so hard for me is there's that cut where the two of them are in that room screaming, and they're dressed so regally and they're beautiful and they're holding on to each other. They're their only hopes. And then they cut straight to Louis screaming in that tiny box. And he knows, like, you know, he is feeling this pain, this deep guttural loss because, you know, she was in the book. Yes, they lovers. I don't know. But it is this feeling of you losing your family, like your only connection to this world. It's like, not to be Anne Rice downer, but like, Christina, you're one of the only people who I still really have a strong connection to, who has seen me both pre-car accident and post-car accident.
Right.
And those are two different people.
Right.
Louis only had Claudia as someone pre-killing of Lestat, post-killing of Lestat. You know what I mean? Like, they have this connection where they have this information that only the two of them know. And now that tie has been severed, and he's kind of like, you know, like a balloon floating off into the wind. He has no direction at that point.
They both share a negative. What bonds them together is partially just hatred for Lestat and being both the victims of mental abuse from Lestat. And unfortunately, that's not everything that they need.
Yeah.
She does need a different type of love, and he is finding something in Armand that he doesn't have with her, because he too wants someone that is older and can help guide him in his like path of figuring out who he is and what all of this is about. So it's sad because they like don't want to let each other go, but maybe they should move on.
Yeah, but they should have had that opportunity to. They, like Lestat often gives an opportunity to choose. They should have had that choice instead of being torn apart the way they were.
Lestat also gives that choice after he's already drank someone almost to the point of death. So
it's not the greatest.
It's a heavy sale tactic.
Yeah. It's like a parachute salesman being like, I'm going to push you out of this plane.
Yeah.
But for $100, you can buy a parachute to jump with.
Yeah. You can choose to buy this or not. It's your choice.
You're going out either way. Yeah. It's just when. But the thing that I do enjoy about the Claudia death scene is that we immediately get the Louis revenge scene.
Yeah. Which
I think is just so... I know we laugh about it because those vampires are just like popping up out of them, out of those coffins. But it's just so well done.
Yeah.
Like we just talked about how Brad Pitt wasn't fully in it, but I think that those scenes, those two scenes together back to back, you really, like, I think he was in those. Like, he was fully invested in those two scenes.
Yeah, I love the like vampire attacking part. And you know how earlier in the movie when as you talked about it with Tom Cruise saying read her thoughts, and then he says, well, the gift appears differently to all of us. I think that Louis' gift is kicking ass and setting shit on fire because he can't stop. He can't stop doing either thing.
Jesse had the same comment. He was like, so is this just like his thing?
Who is from like a vampire look, who is your favorite vampire look in this movie?
Oh my God, it's so difficult. It's so difficult because I really enjoy Claudia's whole vibe. Like, listen, if I were a young child, I would want the finest things too. But it's kind of like a toss-up between like the look of Antonio Banderas and Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I that would be my top two as well. And I just love Antonio Banderas' look in it, and I love like the long red robe, which they then stole for What We Do in the Shadows. Like I love all of it, and it struck me watching it this time that he is the most different looking from the book,
Yeah.
but it works so well. And he almost, with his eyebrows and the like really pale skin, he almost gives like a Bela Lugosi,
Yeah.
Frank Langella type old school Dracula, like that, the tall, dark, and handsome. Like he's the darker
Yeah.
vampire. Whereas even though Louis has darker hair, it's still not as dark, and he's still like very bright looking, and Antonio's just like dark.
Well, I think that really works too because he's supposed to be like the oldest of all of the vampires that we meet. And that would make so much sense when we compare vampires, you know, like maybe somebody ran into him, saw him, and used that as inspiration for these other, you know, vampires down the line. Because it's true, he does look like the most stereotypical. Why can't I say that word today? Vampire idea. You know, like when you go to buy a vampire costume, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
All he was missing was that big medal that every vampire apparently seems to have. Some weird medallion, like he fought in a big war or something. Like
it's the vampire story. You just go there, you know, after a few hundred years, and then you get your stuff.
Yeah, it's like a club. Like after 100 years as a vampire, you get a big giant gold cross with a ruby in it. Like, congratulations, you did it.
200. Now you get a long red robe.
Is it like your welcome gift is one of those weird thimble things?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, so Lestat is clearly a younger vampire because that's the only thing he's gotten so far.
It's like an AA but for vampires. It's like his whole design. It's perfect.
I love it.
But there's something about I just can't get out of my head the look at the end of the film when it's just Tom Cruise with his hand on the steering wheel and all you see is him fluffing out the lace of his shirt over the cuff of his jacket. And it's just, there's something about the entire design of Lestat, and it's, you can really pinpoint where they are in history.
Right.
By what they're wearing. And the fact that it's always something that boggles my mind is like, when you're reading the book too, you get to the point where it's like Lestat becomes this recluse. And like he's kind of that way at the end of the movie. And all I kept thinking was, you never age and you never grow old. Like, why am I reading this thinking you are like a decrepit old lady? Like you're not. You're just just sad.
Yeah.
And that's like, and that really plays out in his clothes. Like he never changes his clothes in the film.
Yeah, there's also like a feeling like, you know how there's that, the stars, they're just like us. Yeah. And that feeling of being an outsider and then seeing someone that's so grand feeling the same way. And with vampires, they on paper might have what everybody wants, which is to be beautiful and attractive and live forever. And you don't have to worry about some of the mundane parts of life. And yet they're all sad. Yeah. They're all playing with a level of guilt. They all are feeding into their very worst desires, but at the end of the day feel hollow. So it's this like interesting view of something that you might find to be so confident and powerful.
Yeah, well, that's kind of like what Louis says in the book, where he's talking to Armand in their weird secret fireplace room. And he's like, Armand refers to it as a power. And Louis like, I don't see this as powers or a gift. It's a curse. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think that they all kind of carry that in the back of their minds, that this isn't, I would not purposely wish this on anyone. You accidentally give it to somebody.
Yeah, Lestat's line suggests that he was almost raped into being a vampire, and that he has a little bit of disdain for it, because why would you give someone a choice if you think it might not be the best thing?
Yeah. It's it's this weird, I mean, when you talk about it that way too, like being like the rape of it, you know, the idea of taking someone's blood, you're doing that without their consent. As a vampire,
Right.
you're not going up to somebody and being like, "Hi, are you a blood donor?" Because I need it. Like, you are literally, you are penetrating them and taking what you want from them.
Yeah.
It is a consistent rape that they
Right.
are all doing. And it's very, that's something that they don't really discuss. That's not really brought up a lot. You know, I don't think any vampire has ever been like, I don't.
Well,
No means no and yes means yes. You know what I mean? Like,
this is the weird spectrum for the vampires, because you might see a vampire as that like Nosferatu type look where they are just a leech. They are a leech on society. They are monstrous and they eat you, and they're like a fucking parasite, and it's just monstrous and disgusting. And then on the opposite end, it's very sexual, and it's very much more like not so much of a leech, but more of a sexual like intercourse thing by sucking the blood and the penetration of it, and someone having power and the other one not. And this movie like tries to mix it and dance between the two.
yeah. I don't. And it's weird because I don't know if it achieves what I think they want to achieve by not choosing a side. Because the book,
Maybe the 20 minutes of the cut footage that's all bloody would have pushed it to one side.
because the book makes a choice.
Yeah.
Makes a very deliberate choice that it is basically sexual in nature. And I think like the movie has those moments, especially when Lestat first, basically, I don't know, blood rapes Louis. I don't know how to describe it now. When Tom Cruise bites Brad Pitt's neck, because they're floating up. That's the other thing. I guess you can fly at some point.
I love the floating part. I think it's so cool.
It is
visually.
really cool. And they're floating up there, and there's almost this look of ecstasy on Brad Pitt's face. But then it's almost as if that never happened. We never bring that up again. We don't talk about how it can be. It can feel good. I mean, it happens again with the sex workers.
Yeah.
But when we get to France and that young woman is on stage, she has to be mind controlled to stop like screaming and begging before
it feels like
takes
such
her.
a violation.
Yeah.
It's so violating to her, and the fact that they strip her in front of a room filled of people just feels so like uncomfortable and exploitive. And then to make her like smile while this is happening to her, so fucked up.
That's the one part of the whole movie that I honestly don't enjoy watching, because I think you need to sit in that uncomfortableness because we've been laughing a lot.
Yeah.
A lot for me, definitely. But it's also so uncomfortable compared to some of the other uncomfortable scenes in the movie.
I wouldn't say I enjoy watching it. That's not how I would put it. But what I find fascinating with it is that what Armand and his crew are doing to her is just as, if not a little bit more fucked up than what Lestat did to the old-timey sex workers.
Yeah.
And Louis was so disturbed and upset in that room with those two women. And yet he's falling in love with Armand, who's doing this horrible thing to this woman. Because it's one thing to kill someone, but why would you torture them and embarrass them before killing them? Like, that's just playing with humans.
Yeah.
And yet Louis falling for him. So what's the difference? What, you just want it to be a little bit more artistic?
He needed costumes.
He likes good lighting, Nikki.
He does. The theater. He loves it. I mean, it's just so, that is something that doesn't really come across as well in the movie as it does in the book, is that, you know, Armand and Lestat are basically the same. They were both turned by somebody who fell in love with them, basically. The only difference is that Armand was turned when he could, his vampire lover, waited for him.
Yeah.
To just be a little bit older. I mean, not that old, but a little bit
See, that's
older.
weird too.
It is weird.
That's like, it gives me the creep.
Because what bothers me about that in the book is that when we then meet Armand in the movie, and they don't talk enough about his young gizmo.
Yeah. Young Gizmo.
That he just lets everyone, suckle off of.
So weird.
Because in the book, they talk more about that. And it's still weird in the book, just as it is in the movie.
Yeah.
But in the movie, he's there and gone.
Yeah.
It's
uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable. The uncomfortableness that you think you leave behind when you turn the movie on is still there from the book.
Yeah.
There's still this very young age thing happening a lot.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't, things don't add up in some places. But you know what? Even with all of that, I love the movie. It's one of my favorites. And the book I thought was great. I will definitely want to venture down the path and find out more about what's really happening with this whole world and see how Claudia plays into all those other books, knowing what we know from this one.
I hope we're not let down.
Same. Samey, same.
Now I think we're starting to wind down to the battle of the modern day vampire, right?
Yeah, I think we are.
And just to preface this conversation, think about like all the different depths that we have swam to in this episode on Interview with the Vampire and how broad it is. I mean, there's even like a whole thing about religion and Catholic guilt and the Catholic vibe behind everything in the book that I think is really strong. And we didn't even go into that too much.
Yeah.
Like, there's just so much to talk about with this one.
I do want to bring up, when we talk about this whole Catholic thing, there is something really interesting between Twilight and Interview with the Vampire that I don't know if you picked up.
Mm-hmm.
What?
No, well, just you've got two female writers, and one of them is doing this almost like Mormon propaganda, and the other one has flip-flopped between different religions consistently for years. And I think some of the torment that Louis has is straight from that, whereas the characters in Twilight are written with an agenda.
Oh, yeah. But what I found so interesting between those two is that they almost say the exact same thing in both books. And it's not something I picked up on right away until I started watching the movie for Interview with the Vampire, when the boy in the book asks Louis about, do you like the way I say it every time? Louis. Because in the book he's French. In the movie it's Louis.
Yeah, but I feel like every time you say his name, you get a little bit more French. So like by the end of the podcast, you've got like a black beret and a mustache and a black and white shirt. And like, you're talking like Irish Stephen Ray.
my Frenchless. That's English and French. How do you say Louis is being interviewed? He is how you say vampire? But the boy says to him, like, so is that all made up? Sleeping in coffins, looking at not being able to look at a crucifix. And Louis, Louis says the whole thing where he's like, no, actually, I really enjoy looking at crucifixes. Bella, when she meets the Cullens and goes to their house in the book, they have that huge wooden cross because the dad figure in that book used to work in a church.
Right.
And Edward says that, no, it's like, we don't mind looking at crucifixes. Mm-hmm. And Bella stares at a crucifix for an extended period of time.
Right.
And I found that to be something so interesting because, like you said, we have this idea in Twilight where it's kind of this Mormon overtones. And then you have, Interview with the Vampire where it is all religions that have this weird over-encompassing idea about vampires. But this one thing really connects the two.
Yeah. And, like, because she has toyed with periods of agnosticism and just kind of turning away from all religions. So there's a lot of questioning of whether or not God and heaven and hell and all of that even exist. It's like the vampires in the movie feel like they are both devil and God at the same time, but that none of it actually exists, which is just such a like a dark headspace to be in, and then you're transported into their headspace, and it's just like it's like a negative heavy vibe. And in Twilight there isn't even like a question to that.
Yeah, there is no why are we here and who made us.
Right.
And I think that's the other thing that Interview has that I find to be so, that's the thing with the background that Twilight is missing. There is no questioning of it. They just are. And when you start to question, you can get deeper.
So we have to determine, though, what modern day vampire won.
Yeah. I mean, we are comparing Twilight and Interview to Dracula. Right? Dracula set the golden rule for vampires.
I think Dracula's King Daddy. So these are kind of like the two brothers fighting.
King Daddy. Well, only one can take the throne. I would have to go Interview.
Yeah.
All day long. I think that because, like you said, Twilight pulls a lot from Interview. I think that Dracula gave us the original idea of as what Twilight calls the cold ones. This night walker, this person that we should fear. And Interview took that and expanded upon that idea and that world. And now I think what we're getting as like vampire ideas are all stemming off of Interview versus off of King Daddy Dracula. King Daddy.
Well, I just think that like vampires were popular and they were in so many different movies and they could be sexy. I mean, Bela Lugosi was considered to be sexy Dracula. The whole bit about Dracula.
Sexy Dracula sounds like a costume I bought at Party City. Like, what are you going to be for Halloween? Sexy Dracula.
But a romantic vampire was already a thing. Like, that already existed.
Yeah.
But something happened magically between the Dracula, the Bram Stoker's Dracula, and Interview with the Vampire, where both of them are like so much more legitimate. So much more money was spent in making a really good movie by directors that are talented with a huge cast. It's big, and they're both sexy, but no offense, Gary Oldman, like,
yeah.
Yeah,
listen, I don't want to watch, what was it, the weird Winona Ryder sex scene thing?
Yeah.
I don't need that again.
Yeah. But between those two movies, it like changes things. And Interview with the Vampire is just so much more like cool, sexy, romantic. It's still gothic. And then somehow it's like a game of telephone and it got really fucked up and then Twilight was made.
Yeah. And now that we've crowned King Daddy's successor, we have to do the hard stuff.
Yeah.
The book list.
We do.
Spoiler alert, we've turned ourselves into vampires. We can read each other's minds. We knew exactly where on the list this was going to go.
We're so in sync right now.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
We agreed again.
Yeah.
Because we're just that good. So, the book list. Which, honestly, if anyone takes this and does a book club out of those book lists, please let us know, because I'm so intrigued. We were just talking about this. Our book list is, there's something for everyone, I feel like.
It's very fun.
It is fun. So, the book list as it stands now: Rosemary's Baby, Wizard of Oz, High Fidelity. Coming in at number 4, the successor to King Daddy, Interview with the Vampire, Emma, Hell House, Waiting to Exhale, Jaws, A Night to Remember, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Jumanji, The Birds, Forrest Gump, Twilight, another Tom Cruise classic, Born on the 4th of July, Valley of the Dolls, Mommy Dearest, Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats, Ready Player One, and Eat, Pray, Love.
Yeah.
Woof.
And you know what? Yeah, when you're reading the book list, it's just like fun because some of them feel like were done so long ago. And when I think about how we just put Interview with the Vampire kind of high up on the list, and then I remember the headspace I was in with Eat, Pray, Love, I'm like, yeah, it fucking deserves to be high up because that piece of shit deserves to be at the very bottom.
I know, it's funny when you think about Born on the 4th of July, was just done like 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And it feels like we did that last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we are vampires, Christina. Time just makes no sense. It's both close and far. But
well, and we are exiting the spooky season, but we are staying in the world of dysfunctional families, like our dear vampires.
Yeah, and our next episode, we're gonna make you an offer you can't refuse. We are gonna read and watch and talk all about The Godfather.
Whoop.
I have seen this movie like 100 times.
I have only seen the movie once.
What?
I watched it for the first time during quarantine.
Stop.
Yeah.
No way. I don't know. Is it different if you're Italian? Is that is that a prerequisite in a super Italian family to know all about
when I watched The Godfather, I'm like, this was Nikki's family. This is how she grew up.
No! Oh my God, don't put that out there. My family is not in the mob. Just a PSA, everybody. My family is not in the mob.
But you texted me. You're like, you need to watch The Godfather. It's Italian like me.
I did. Yeah. I mean, I say that to everybody. Like, I enjoy, I don't know. I haven't read the book, but, the movie's fun to watch.
Yeah, I've never read the book either, so that'll be fun. And it's my understanding that the book is kind of long, so I am interested to see what was kept and not kept for the movie.
Yeah, I'm ready to dive in because you know what? I love pasta. I love cannolis. I might make a whole Italian feast out of it when we watch it.
We should. That would be fun.
Oh, we really should. Dinner and a movie. Remember that when that was a show?
Yeah, I used to watch that.
Me too. Oh my God, we should definitely do it. We're making pasta. We have to take photos. We're gonna share our Italian feasts. And November is a rough month for a lot of people.
Yeah.
We're going headlong into the holiday season. And if your family isn't dysfunctional, then you're lying to yourself. So we hope that the next couple of episodes for November make you feel a little bit better about you and your family. But thank you all for joining us on this epic battle that we've put out there into the world. Thank you for helping us as we chose and crowned the ultimate winner. Even though they're sad vampires, they deserve all the glory.
Yeah.
Thanks as always to Jesse, who...
Yes, thank you, Jesse.
He is our audio vampire. Does all the work. He just gave me fang face. He went... he's doing it. He does the most. And thanks as always to Christina.
Aww.
You're my little
thank you, Nikki.
book vampire.
Aww.
I can't. You just suck up all them books. Nom, 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 nom.
I can be a movie vampire and you're a book vampire.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that we're vampires now.
We are vampires.
This is good for me.
Yeah.
We're moving to the Pacific Northwest. We're going to have the best time ever.
So stupid.
It is really stupid. Oh, it really sucks. Ooh. And yeah, thanks again to everybody who listens. And don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, follow us on our Instagram. What's our Instagram handle, Christina?
Page to Screen Pod, right?
I believe so. Follow us, you guys. We've got so much planned for next year. Look, we already want to revisit Anne Rice and go to New Orleans. So what better way to keep up with us than to follow us?
Exactly.
And not like in a creepy vampire Armand kind of way where you like follow my steps. Like just like follow me on Instagram. It's easier that way.
Or unlike a creepy Louis following the boy in 1976 San Francisco at night.
Yeah, don't do that either.
Don't do that
Don't
either.
do that. Follow like a normal person. Make noise. Wear a bell. Do so.
Be a cat.
So for next week, everyone, be a cat. But not like the cats from Cats. Wait, we're screwing this whole thing up. just be normal. Rate, review, subscribe, and follow us on Instagram. Yeah, and until next time, bye.
Bye.
Bye.